ever feel like you're addicted to junk food? Unfortunately, you probably are, because they actually design those foods to be addictive. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can gain control over your hunger and stop junk food overeating. So the topic of junk food addiction and the fact that food manufacturers literally design the foods to be addictive has actually been gaining a lot of press. So if you put junk food addiction in on a search engine, you will see that there are websites all over the web talking about junk food addiction, the way that food scientists engineer foods to be addictive. There's one food scientist named Stephen Witherly, and he actually wrote a report called Why Humans Love Junk Food. And in this report, he reveals a lot of the techniques that he used as a food scientist to create addictive junk food. But he also shares a lot of ideas of how you can take some of these principles and apply them into your own home cooking so that you can create meals that will be just as pleasurable and just as enjoyable as the junk food that we all know we need to stop eating. So one example is what's called vanishing caloric density. And you may have heard me mention this before because it's pretty genius. So essentially, the technique is to design a food that has a high oro sensation, or sensation of crunching when you put the food in your mouth. You also get a lot of taste sensation. But then the food very quickly melts in your mouth and kind of creates the illusion that you haven't eaten anything. So potato chips and Cheetos are a perfect example of this vanishing caloric density. So you take a bite, you get a very big sensation, and then very quickly the food dissipates in your mouth, and it doesn't really trigger the reaction of hormones in your brain to tell you that you've eaten something. So you can literally sit there and eat an entire bag of Cheetos without even realizing it, and maybe even still feeling hungry after you've consumed this huge amount of calories. So to kind of contrast that, we could think of a real food like carrots or carrot sticks as something that you could eat as a snack. That'd be a great alternative to Cheetos or potato chips. So when you eat an actual food, number one, you have to spend more time masticating or chewing the food. This starts to trigger the salivary enzymes and different hormones that your body releases to help you digest the food, and also to send a message to your brain that you've just eaten something. So this is why it's a lot harder to sit there and eat an entire bag of carrot sticks than it is to sit there and eat an entire bag of Cheetos. Because when you eat real food, it actually tells your brain you've eaten something. And you also get the nutrients and the fiber that then go in and satisfy your hunger. So eventually your brain will be sending you a message that it's time to stop eating. Another technique is called dynamic contrast. So this is about having contrasting flavors and even contrasting tactile sensations incorporated into the food. So there's actually a lot of different techniques, and I'm not going to sit here and explain all of them. But what I encourage you to do, if you're someone who's addicted to junk food, is to look up this report by Stephen Witherly and kind of familiarize yourself with the different techniques that they're using. And or at least what happened to me, is as I was reading about them, I was going, oh, yeah, wow, yeah, that's spot on. That's why I can overeat Cheetos, or that's why I'm addicted to this. And so the first thing is realizing the different techniques that are being used in junk food, and then noticing those things when you eat the food. So you start becoming aware of how the food has been engineered to trick your brain into overeating. And then the next step from there would be to start using those techniques in your own cooking so that you can create food that is just as addictive or just as pleasurable as all of those different junk foods. So in the realm of food manufacturing, we have food scientists instead of chefs. These are scientists who are developing the food specifically with the intention of causing overeating and causing you to crave those foods. We also have something called food optimization. This is where they're literally spending huge amounts of time and money optimizing the foods to be as addictive as possible. And they even use a term called the bliss point to describe that perfect balance of flavors, not too much, not too little, so that they can actually trigger that reward response in the brain. So your body is actually releasing endorphins and dopamine and rewarding you for eating this food. So in the sense that drugs are addictive because they stimulate a reward response, these junk foods are addictive in the exact same way. They're literally engineering them to trigger that reward response in the brain. So one way that we can start to counteract this addictive programming is to stop rewarding ourselves with junk foods. So you get a raise at work or something really great happens. It's really common for us to reward ourselves by going out for junk food or ordering dessert. So if you can try to resist rewarding yourself with junk food, this is going to be a really helpful way to stop that conditioning. Because if you're rewarding yourself with junk food, and then the junk food literally sets off the reward pathways in your brain, then you're kind of like adding insult to injury, so to speak. You're kind of double programming yourself to always crave those foods, especially when things are going bad and work is stressful and you don't get the raise that you asked for. But when we reward ourselves with junk food, we're actually going to make ourselves more likely to then turn to junk food when we're feeling bad. So we're going to want to have other rewards or other ways of rewarding ourselves when something goes well, or coping with maybe those not so good feelings when we're feeling really stressed or things aren't going the way we planned. Now, as far as rewards go, it's going to really vary from person to person because everyone is going to be different. So maybe it's getting a manicure or going out and going shopping and buying something new for yourself. Maybe it's going out with your friends and doing something fun. The bottom line is just that if we can start to reward ourselves with something other than food, then maybe we can stand a fighting chance at breaking that correlation or association of junk food with being a reward. And especially if you're a parent, this is a really, really important tip, to stop rewarding your kids with junk food. Because guess what? Now you're just encouraging them to associate junk food with being a reward. This is something that happens a lot in schools, right? When somebody does something good or they get good grades, maybe they get candy or cookies or something like that. So this is not necessarily an easy thing to do, but if you can just start having the intention, rewarding yourself with something other than junk food, then that's going to be a really good step in the right direction. Now, before I go on with the rest of my tips, I just have to point out that because junk foods trigger the same reward pathways in your brain that addictive drugs do, there is a certain portion of the population whose junk food addiction really needs to be treated just like an addiction to drugs or an addiction to alcohol. And what I mean by that is, if you really have been eating junk food for years and these addictive patterns have really been drilled in over and over and over again, you're going to be in the same position as a recovering alcoholic, where just even one sip of alcohol re-triggers that addiction. If you feel like you fall into this category, I encourage you to check out the variety of like Overeating Anonymous type groups that are out there. These are support systems for people who have junk food addictions that are trying to be there and be supportive of one another. If you really are truly addicted to junk food, the following tips may not necessarily help you. But for the rest of us, hopefully these ideas can be helpful in helping you take control of your hunger once and for all. So my first tip is to avoid extreme hunger, or what we might know as being hangry. So that's when you get so hungry, it's actually to the point that you're irritable or maybe just downright mean. All right, and I think we all know that feeling. So if you can avoid being super hungry, you are going to be able to retain that sense of control over yourself, because the hungrier you get, the more you lose that self-control. So carrying around healthy snacks would be a really great way to prevent yourself from reaching that point of hunger. Something like trail mix is a great idea. There's something called Kind bars, which is a little like fruit and nut bar. Those are all great examples of things that are very simple. Either have a stash of them at work, so that when you're getting hungry at work, you can eat a little something and resist the fast food restaurant on your way home. Or even to carry something like that around with you in your purse or your backpack so that you always have something on hand to help you avoid getting super hungry. When we're talking about satisfying our hunger, it's essential to point out that real foods can satisfy your hunger, and processed foods, especially junk foods, just can't or won't. They're engineered specifically to not satisfy your hunger so that you'll keep eating. So if we have this intention to satisfy our hunger and avoid being hungry, we have to eat real foods. We have to eat what's called whole foods. So that's like eating a piece of fruit or eating a vegetable, things like whole grains and legumes. These are all examples of whole foods. That just means that they haven't been processed. Once you have a food that comes in a box, has a long ingredient list, or comes out of a fast food window, these foods have been so processed, you can literally think of them as partial foods. They don't contain the fiber that real food had. They don't contain the nutrients that real food had. So if you can start to include natural foods or whole foods into your diet as much as possible, that right there is going to help prevent that hunger and prevent that hanger, you could say, from being a constant issue. So if you're constantly hungry, it's going to be way harder to pass up the McDonald's than if you can actually satisfy your hunger with things like fiber, healthy fats, healthy protein, and essentially just eating real foods is going to be the key to satisfying that real hunger. Do you remember that advertisement where Paris Hilton is washing somebody's car in a bikini, and then all of a sudden you look over and she's taking this big sensual bite of a giant hamburger? Fast food advertising. Now, I have not had cable in probably over 10 years, but anytime I am watching TV at someone's house, I'm constantly amazed at the sheer volume of fast food and junk food advertisements that we're exposed to. And while you may kind of roll your eyes at a junk food ad or even roll your eyes at Paris Hilton while she's sensually eating a hamburger, the bottom line is that these advertisements do kind of seep into our subconscious. And you have to understand that in the same way food manufacturers spend a lot of time and money engineering the foods to have a certain effect on you, they also spend a lot of time and money engineering the advertisements to help form associations in your brain like beer and hot chicks or Paris Hilton and a giant hamburger. So if you can try and stop exposing yourself to junk food advertisements, that is going to be a huge, huge benefit in helping to break those associations in your brain that those junk food companies have tried so hard to create. I really hope that you have found this video helpful. I actually had a lot more tips written down that I wanted to share, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap this video up for today. I think it's probably long enough already. But if you liked this video, please let me know in the comment section below, and I'd be happy to do a part 2 with the rest of my tips on this topic. If you'd like to learn more about me and my health coaching practice, you can visit me at CorrinaRachel.com. I hope that you'll consider subscribing to PsycheTruth so that you can see more videos like these. And if you'd like to help support our video production efforts, I invite you to check out our Patreon campaign. We have a lot of exclusive and behind-the-scenes content that we offer to our patrons. We're incredibly grateful for all of the contributions that our Patreon campaign has been able to put towards our video production efforts. So I want to thank you again so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next video.